Welcome back. If you're new, you can have me scuttling around inside your skull by subscribing. Click the bell notification and you won't miss anything. To ensure that you get the best and most immersive creepy experience with this horror story, please wear headphones or turn up the volume. Europe's most violent haunting. A normal house on a quiet, normal street in the town of Pontefract, West Yorkshire, UK, is the location of what has been acknowledged as Europe's most violent haunting. Number 30 East Drive, Pontefract, West Yorkshire stands on a corner at the top of a hill close to what was once the site of the town gallows. Living at the address were Joe and Jean Pritchard, Philip aged 15 and Diane aged 12. Paranormal activity began manifesting in the Pritchard home back in 1966. The activity was believed to have been caused by a poltergeist, later to be known as the Black Monk of Pontefract, and referred to by the family as Fred. Such occurrences as water pools forming, lights turning on and off, furniture overturning, pictures being slashed, knocking sounds, objects levitating, objects disappearing and reappearing, heavy breathing, foul smells, farmyard noises, sudden temperature changes, and a black-robed figure appearing more and more frequently were all reported at the location. What makes this case stand out is the credibility of those who experienced some of the activity. The police, a local MP and the vicar were all witness to the remarkable happenings plaguing the household, and all attempts to exorcise the poltergeist failed and were met with mockery. The first encounter with the poltergeist occurred over a warm August bank holiday weekend in 1966. The family had gone to Devon, leaving 15-year-old Philip with his grandmother Sarah at number 30. Grandmother Sarah was alone in the house when she felt a cold rush of wind, despite the day being warm. When Philip returned home, he noticed white powder falling from mid-air all over the living room onto the floor, despite the room being recently redecorated. Sarah went to find her daughter Marie, who lived over the road, to show her what was happening. On seeing the white powder on the floor, Marie went to the kitchen to fetch a cloth and immediately slipped in a pool of water on the floor. Numerous pools of water began forming on the floor, and even turning off the water supply made no difference as the pools continued to appear. The water board were then called and investigated that same day, and after extensive examination of the pipes and drains, no leaks or blockages were found. An hour later, the pools all dried up. This was just the start. At approximately 7 p.m, 15-year-old Philip went into the kitchen, discovered the worktop was covered in sugar and tea leaves. After calling his grandmother in to witness what was going on, they both saw the button on the tea dispenser moving slowly in and out, covering the draining board with dry tea leaves. This carried on even after it was empty and drove Sarah to shout out in alarm. As she did, there was a loud crash from the hall. They slowly opened the door into the hall to find it silent, empty and dark. That was until the hall light clicked on of its own accord. On reaching the bottom of the stairs, they saw the source of the noise. A plant which was normally located at the bottom of the stairs was halfway up them minus its pot, which was now on the landing above. Whilst in the hall, they were then further startled by the sudden noise from the kitchen. The crockery cupboard was vibrating as if someone was trapped within and trying to escape. As Philip grabbed at the cupboard door to open it, the vibration stopped, and almost instantly another loud banging started up elsewhere in the property. The chill in the air returned, and in a panic, Sarah decided to fetch her daughter Marie again. As soon as Marie set foot in the kitchen, the crockery cupboard resumed its violent rattling to such an extent, Sarah went next door to see if the neighbours were responsible for the noises. They weren't. They had thought the noises had come from number 30, and by the time Sarah returned, the noises had thankfully stopped. Thinking it was over, Sarah and Philip decided to retire for the night. After securing the house, Sarah looked in on Philip to wish him good night, and as she did, a heavy set of drawers began to sway without explanation. That was enough. Out of fear for their own safety, Sarah and Philip fled the house and sought refuge with neighbours. When the Pritchards returned from home from their holiday, all activity ceased. They concluded that there must have been some kind of logical explanation to explain the events, as they lived in peace for the next 2 years. But then 2 years later, the activity abruptly came back and subjected the family to several years of extreme paranormal activity. Paranormal phenomena became so commonplace that the family called the poltergeist Fred, perhaps in an attempt to normalise it and coexist, as house-proud Jean refused to be terrorised out of her own house, which is a very typical Yorkshire trait. Loud, unexplained crashing sounds were common, and the presence seemed to enjoy putting a display on for visitors. Objects flew in the air or would levitate, then would disappear and reappear in different locations. Faces would be slapped, people shoved downstairs. At times the antics of the poltergeist were harmless and amusing, but this was not always the case. 2 exorcisms were attempted, but these only seemed to stoke the activity higher. After a concerned family friend doused holy water around the house, the poltergeist retaliated and proceeded to paint upside-down crosses on the living room walls and destroy the crucifixes decorating the home. The main target of the second phase of activity was now 14-year-old Diane. She was often thrown from her bed, and on one occasion in the latter stages of the haunting, Diane's long hair was suddenly standing on end, and then she was dragged up the stairs, kicking and screaming by her throat by an invisible hand, which left obvious finger marks and bruising around her neck. The physical manifestation of the poltergeist did not happen until late into the haunting. A black, cloaked figure hovered over Joe and Jean Pritchard as they lay in bed, which soon vanished. Other family members and visitors also started to report a figure that resembled a monk, although no facial features were ever seen under the robe. Shortly after the physical manifestation, the activity ceased and never occurred again. Research done on the origins of the haunting identity came up with a possible culprit as a 16th century monk who was hung for the rape and murder of a girl in the time of Henry VIII, and the haunting was known as the Black Monk of Pontefract. And all this makes sense as the property is built by the site of the town gallows. The film was based on the haunting of number 30. Director Pat Holden witnessed many of the events firsthand, as Jean Pritchard was his aunt. The increased media and public interest in the property has led locals to believe the Black Monk is beginning to stir again. Philip Pritchard sold the long-time empty property to the film's producer. A neighbour who saw Philip tidying the garden casually mentioned that she thought the property had been sold as she heard the TV blasting out all night. Philip then informed her that there was no TV and the property was totally empty. He then went pale and said, "Oh God, it started again." If you enjoy listening to my voice, watch another video right now, and remember to subscribe. Leave me a comment, I'd love to know your thoughts. And one of you listening right now is gonna have me knock on your window in 4, 3, 2,